Okay, so I don't know if you can see this or not, but we're making this gas tank perimeter. It's the only thing on this car that's actually kind of bad. Everything else on this car was amazingly good shape. It was sold as a car that was from the high desert, and we can believe it because this car is pretty clean to the exception of this gas tank perimeter. Now, don't pay any mind to all this. This is going to sand right off. This is just a little bit of surface rough on some stock metal we have. But what I'm doing is I'm making the entire perimeter on the shrinker stretcher. And as you can see, it's well on its way to being made. I tend to go after the most complicated part first. That way the rest of it goes fairly quickly and easily. And the reason this is such an exaggerated length is because I'm going to put this on the bead roll and create the lip that is on the top side of the tank. That way it can kind of drop in as a sleeve. But this is not that hard of a job to do if you have the tools. We have a shrinker stretcher that's been in the shop from day one. It is one of the most inexpensive tools we've ever bought for this shop, but it has been an absolute workhorse. So it's one of those things you don't have to buy the most expensive one in the world. The cheapies will do. Anyhow, so what we're doing here is we're creating this entire lip. Again, it's exaggerated in length so I can create the roll on the bead roller, which you'll see later. This is one of those repairs. It looks fantastic from from your point of view, but it's actually one of the easiest things we can do around here. Okay, so this particular one is a shrinker, this is a stretcher. So when you put this all the way up against here, it makes a mild bite or mild bending. The further away from the perimeter wall you go, the more aggressive it does. However, if you get too quick and too aggressive with it, you can start kinking the walls and it kind of becomes a bit of a mess to straighten out. So patience is everything when you're doing one of these. So you're just taking small advancements over as you press on it, and it just spreads the metal out, which creates the shrink. In this case, it's gathering it together. Okay, so if you watch the edges here, you're going to see it bring it around. And it's going to take several passes, and I'm not trying to do this in a hurry to make this happen. Okay, now I'm moving it out and taking what's called half bites. Half bites are more aggressive because you're pinching just the perimeter of the shrinking area. And you got to be real careful because you can move an awful lot of metal very quickly. Okay, so now I'm going back to full bites. Those half bites just help me orientate the metal so it knows where it needs to go a little easier. And you can see basically how it's coming along. Looks like I'm just going to start pulling from that perimeter over, and it should line up really well. Okay, so basically what you're seeing right now is I've started the rolled edge. All I have to do is bring this flat over here, and this will basically mimic the entire lip of the top of the gas tank perimeter. That's it. In this business, you tend to get a little jaded. After doing this for well over a decade, you've heard what you think is just about every story. When this car first came to us, it was just essentially a rolling shell. The person who bought it was convinced that this car was going to be fairly honest. He thought it was probably never resprayed, and he felt like it was probably very minimal on the rust levels. And it's not to take away from anybody in that thought process, but however, we rarely see that to be the actual case. We have almost 60 cars in the shop at any given point in time, and all of them come from more or less a similar story. So we tend to reserve our judgment of whether a car is that worthy or not until after it comes back from our media blasting process. By the way, you have to excuse it. We're having a windstorm today. There's a lot of wind out there. So that's the noise in the background is. Anyway, so when this car came back from the blasters, I was nothing short of astonished of how amazing this car was in condition. It has 4 points of interest, and that was it. This, which is already fixed, one on the other side, which is fixed, the gas tank area, which you saw that I'm currently in the process of restoring, and then there's a little bit of damage on the nose, but essentially that is it. And this car is essentially about as near perfect as you would ever hope to come back from a blaster, especially for something that is, you know, approaching 50 years old. Anyhow, this car comes from what is the holy grail of places in the States to find a car. It comes from what is called the high desert. Desert cars don't necessarily mean that they're going to be rust-free or damage-free or anything like that. High desert cars, however, tend to be very much that case when that's true. And I'll tell you why. The high deserts of California, there is very little humidity, very little moisture. It almost never rains up there, and cars tend to stay in a very reserved state. They'll be sun-baked. Anything in the vinyls and leathers and whatnot will be absolutely trashed. However, the metal will be as well preserved as you would ever hope, because again, there's no moisture up there. There's very little to no humidity up there. So, you know, things tend to be in a time capsule, if you will. Now, this car was resprayed, but only the back half, and that was to take care of some of questionable work that was done back there. But essentially, this has got to be one of the best preserved Supras I've ever put my hands on. Really excited about this build. Customer's got a real good vision about it. He knows exactly what his intents are, which is great, because usually when cars get here, customers are all over the map of what they want to do. We're only limited to their imagination. We can do an awful lot. However, this car is going to stay fairly original, and that's great. But anyway, I just thought you would be amazed to see there's actually a Supra out there that is not all rusty as can be, that has been very well preserved. This is going to be a special build, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so our tank surround is starting to come into place now. It may be hard for you to see, but we've got the rolled edge to compensate for the rolled edge on the top of this. It'd be easy enough just to put a right angle on this and shrink or stretch the shaping, but because we have to go up into the perimeter because there's a lot of collateral damage there, it was just best to create this. So what's going to happen is the piece that runs around the top, we'll just do the counter to this. We'll roll it back and we'll weld all that together when it's done. Now at this point we got it made, but I'm not going to weld that in place like that. What we're going to do is we're going to bring the gas tank down and we're going to construct it onto the gas tank. That way we know it fits to form and we don't have to mess with it once the car is painted. Alright, that should probably be it. Making these things is not that hard. It's just a matter of having the right tooling. And if you find yourself having to make window frames and stuff like that on your car, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a shrinker stretcher. So now we're going to go drop it on the tank and see what it looks like. Alright, the spacing is equal all the way around it, so I'm going to call that a really good fit. So in the last stretch to realize, maybe you can see this, maybe you can't. But again, we created the radius just like on the trunk floor, so you can meet this with the metal around the top side perimeter repair. So all we're going to do is the areas on the top side of the flooring that has pinhole rust in it. We're going to cut those out, and we're going to make pieces and create the same bead roll like we did on this to meet this, so that we have a nice clean transition, and it'll look, as far as the radius goes, it'll look just like the factory one. Making hard right angles on the metal is probably not all that bad of an idea, but the thing is if you're making spot repairs, harsh right angles tend to look like right angles instead of the stamped soft draw radiuses that most of the stuff has. And it's those little things that make it look like it wasn't repaired. So now we're going to see what it looks like in the trunk. There you go. So once the old one's cut out, that's going to look just like the original did. So now that we're at this point, I'll clean up my welds, then we'll throw it in the blast cabinet and get rid of the surface rust that's on our sheet still here, and that'll be it. Okay, so this is actually called a door skinning hammer. When you have an arsenal of body hammers, you find that you gravitate towards certain hammers for certain jobs. This one is specifically designed to fold the door skin over the door frame. However, in a situation like this, it works really well. Now, if you remember, we created the bead roll on the gas tank outer perimeter as to match the drop-in, just like this, on the tank. And it's starting to come around really well. Now, in this process, normally what we would do is we would move around on our welding, but because I'm taking the opportunity of the heat from the welding activity to form this a little tighter. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's a nice hot spot, so I'm going to start hammering right in front of it with the domed radius on this. And what I'm seeing is that metal is rolling really tight to the top of the trunk plate. There you go. I'm going to repeat that process all the way around the gas tank perimeter. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me a minimum build of weld, so it's less to remove at the end. But it's going to give me a nice tight fusing of this metal to this metal. Because the last thing in the world you need is where this was the trunk floor and I have a gas tank rim that I'm making sit on top of it. Well, this area right here is now the new area for rust to build. So we're going to make a nice tight weld all the way around it. We'll come underneath it, hammer it tight up against the new pieces that we made, and then we're going to seam seal that. That way it'll never be a problem ever again.